Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin mining or crypto mining in general, and talking about how we can actually be more renewable within the crypto mining space as a whole, and how Bitcoin or other crypto mining coins functions as a way to use excess energy that is wasted regardless of where it is going. So I don't know if this was by design by any chance when Satoshi actually made Bitcoin, but it just so happens that Bitcoin allows for you to use waste energy or harness waste energy for certain purposes that otherwise you would just be spending money on the energy regardless. So let's get into it. It says here, energy waste contributes significantly to greenhouse gas emissions. In the United Kingdom, so that's where we're from, approximately 62% of the energy generated is rejected, meaning it's not used effectively and contributes to unnecessary carbon dioxide and methane emissions. The inefficiency exacerbates global warming and climate change, leading to severe weather events, rising sea levels, biodiversity loss. So it says, what do we mean by energy waste? Is known as energy waste or wasted energy occurs when electricity or other forms of power are used unnecessarily or inefficiently. This can happen in various environments, from offices where lights remain on after everyone's left, or left factories with equipment that leak energy even when not in active use. So that's just some examples of wasted energy, but the main wasted energy that we're kind of talking about here, at least across the world, would be inefficiencies or peak times of electricity. For example, in Australia or any of these hot countries, if you had solar panels there and it was peak times, so midday, your solar panels would be generating a lot of electricity with nowhere to go because nobody's really using it within the day. It's not until you get home from around the 4 o'clock to the 9 o'clock range where people are using the most energy. So that solar power that's actually harnessed, either you store it in a battery, which becomes more expensive because you have to store more and more because you're always going to have a peak at around 12 o'clock, or it's just dissipated off as heat. And then you just use how much is running through at a certain amount of time. So they will have batteries to store it, but if you have to add more, then it just becomes more costly to store the batteries when you can actually use this energy at some points in time, the runoff energy at least, to mine cryptocurrency. And it's basically at no cost. Another example might be for oil or natural gas. So they have a flare runoff, and this is called flared gas Bitcoin mining. It says environmental capitalists have championed flared gas mining as a shining example of Bitcoin fixes this for any good reason. However, a flared gas Bitcoin mine isn't a simple plug and play operation. So what they actually do is you have a flare gas, which is just kind of like upbuilt pressure, or maybe there's not demand for it at a certain time, and that can basically be burned and is already being burned, and you can turn that into energy to power Bitcoin miners. So you can actually recoup some of the value of that energy. And if you don't know, across the world, the main thing that actually powers the whole world is obviously energy. If you can reduce energy prices or use them more efficiently, that reflects on a country and a business and across the world globally. For example, in the UK we have very high energy prices, which means that businesses have to pay more for energy. Every business runs on energy, so they're going to have to pay more for it. And more on the industrial side, that takes a lot of power and costs a lot. So if you could reduce the energy, or at least use it more efficiently through the means of mining, it would actually affect the bottom line of a company, a business, and a country. So this is one of the main things that they do in Texas, I believe, and down here is using flare gas because it's very cheap. All they have to do is set up some conversion from the flare gas energy into obviously electricity to power the Bitcoin miners, and then you go from there. It's a very cheap way of actually doing it because there's not really much to go into it in terms of paying for the power. It's already being burned regardless. So 6 reasons why operators may flare gas from an oil well: temporary flaring at the start of production, emergency flaring, gas quality may cause an operator to flare gas, gas can become temporarily stranded, geographically stranded gas is an excellent target for mining, economically stranded gas. And this kind of brings into question, if you can offer a lower electricity rate, Bitcoin miners will flock to that place, and we've seen it in Texas, we've seen it in Russia and China. Because they have lower electricity rates, Bitcoin miners will automatically go to there. It's more profitable, so why not move all their mining facilities over to these places? And it incentivizes more of a microeconomy through there as well, because you have a microeconomy of Bitcoin miners. They spend money through building facilities, hiring electricians, and that creates a microeconomy within itself. So you can see how a lot of these methods of actually mining can be used to grow a bigger economy within a certain place or area, depending on the power cost. As I've said, there are some kind of Goldilocks zones for crypto mining. It's probably around here and then around here, not so much in Europe anymore. But you don't see too many miners actually mining in Europe because of the high prices of electricity. That's just how it goes. So if Europe had very low electricity rates, I'm sure miners would flock to there as well, and that could start microeconomies within the places that offer lower electricity rates. So if you want to incentivize miners to go to your area, all you have to do is either drop the electricity rates or find a way to use any spare electricity that's being generated to offer incentives for miners in that regard. As we said, for example, in Australia, let's just say that miners are allowed to mine using solar power for free between the hours of 10 and 3 o'clock. Then that would incentivize miners to move stuff there because it's free power that they can't use anyway. And it kind of works in the inverse proportion to this as well. So using excess energy that wasn't used previously and putting it into Bitcoin miners, and then the inverse of that is actually using the energy or just buying electricity to mine Bitcoin, but using the heat energy of Bitcoin in real world processes. For example, you see things like this in a greenhouse gas, where a study highlights the transformative potential of repurposing the industrial waste heat for agricultural processes. So they use Bitcoin mining. They were going to have to heat the warehouse anyway for a greenhouse, but if they can heat it with Bitcoin, recuperate some of the cost whilst also heating up the plants, then on the bottom line of a business, that's way better than just wasting the energy, as it's going to be paid for regardless. So you can see that happening. I believe that in New York and a couple of other places, they have saunas which are powered by Bitcoin energy. Now that is using immersion heating. There is a lot of intricacies that go into that, but there are real world uses for this. Any kind of time that you need heat or need to have something regulated at a certain temperature, mainly in colder countries. So you have like in the northern hemisphere, a bunch of countries that are colder that need heat to do certain processes. This would be a better way or more efficient way to use the energy. And it doesn't really matter what cryptocurrency you're mining, as long as you use the heat for something. But of course you want to be the most profitable you can, so you can take a chunk of that and sell it off and recuperate some of the cost. So over time we have seen these things like the heat bit, which personally is a very glorified way of mining. It's kind of just like an S9 put into a box, and then they've overclocked it or underclocked it to use less energy but produce more heat. So they take a regular base S9, I believe, or at least the boards within them, and then they underclock it so that it uses less energy but lets the temperature go higher on the boards, and then you can recuperate some of the costs through Bitcoin mining. Now, if you were smart about it and you didn't buy one of these, that's a good thing, because we did make a video on it maybe a couple of years ago where we kind of went over and said this is just a glorified S9 put into there. And I think they were selling for, $1,000 at the time. But you can buy an S9 if we look down here. Well, I don't think anyone's selling them, but you can get an S9 for very cheap, and you can overclock it / underclock it to have a very low input of watts with a very high heat. And I'm sure that's what some niche companies are doing to actually use the heat from the Bitcoin mining, is they're trying to get it as efficient as possible. I believe that there's a chart out there where you can see the most efficient range for certain miners. And as you draw the watts down, I think at around 50% of the watts, you get the best efficiency to heat ratio. So they're not really looking for profitability necessarily. They're looking for the efficiency to the amount of heat they can produce. It is a little bit different to Bitcoin mining, but they're not going for profitability necessarily. They already know that they're going to take a loss, but they're taking less of a loss because they're spending the energy regardless. So I think over the next couple of years, that's kind of what we'll see as Bitcoin is still growing as a cryptocurrency. There's still many applications and people are investing in it. But as time goes on, I think we'll see more incentivized ways of Bitcoin mining from certain areas around the world. For example, in this Sweden, Norway and Finland area, you have a lot of saunas that could potentially use the heat from Bitcoin mining to heat that. And then, as I said, with solar panel runoff or even wind farm runoff, so you could have it up here. I know there's a lot of wind farms around here that when the energy is being produced regardless, let's say it's a very windy day and they don't need the energy in the middle of the day, they could offer it to Bitcoin miners. Now, one thing about this is that it doesn't strand the energy anywhere. So, for example, they said about flare gas and the fact that it's stranded at a certain place, so you can't move that and it's stranded, but you can always move Bitcoin miners or cryptocurrency miners to a region. For example, let's say that you wanted to move them from Texas to Australia because they offered some sort of rate for solar panels. You could ship all of the miners over to here, use the energy right there, and therefore it wouldn't be stranded. So you can utilize energy that's stranded across the globe as long as you have the miners in place to do that. So it's very interesting to see over time how this will actually play out in the future. I think that there's a lot of niche people that are doing this around the world, but it hasn't become such a mainstream thing yet. And there's multiple uses anytime you need heat or you need regular temperature, and then anytime that you have overhaul on the electricity grid. For example, Texas produces a lot of electricity, and maybe at some point they're overproducing and they can't export that energy anywhere else. So that's a perfect place to mine Bitcoin because you can export it to the Bitcoin miners, which can be moved around. So it works in an inverse way. And there's also been times where Bitcoin mining has allowed the electricity or the grid to be more stable. I know in Texas there was a storm maybe 2 years ago where the actual grid started paying crypto miners to stay off the network, which would stabilize and leave a bunch of energy ready for if the storm hits, they can get power up to certain places because they don't want the power going down. So you can be incentivized by that as well by providing or offering the service of shutting down the crypto miners, because you can't necessarily shut down houses, but crypto mining is not an essential thing, so that can be shut down. So there's lots of different uses for efficiency, whether to do with heating something or using excess electricity or power that cannot be moved across the globe. Which leads us to the future, which I think there's going to be a kind of revolution of Bitcoin mining and solo Bitcoin mining, so small home miners that we're already kind of seeing, but they're not as efficient as I'd like to be, and they're also too expensive. But as soon as somebody comes out with a product that's less expensive and more efficient from the power to heat ratio, that's kind of when we'll see more of these pop up. I think we're also going to see more solutions for this as time goes on, and people are going to be utilizing Bitcoin miners for certain scenarios within companies and across the globe. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts on this because it's an interesting topic that not a lot of people speak about, and I kind of think it needs to be spread around a little bit more, that there are different uses, and it's not necessarily that crypto mining is a waste of energy. It can be harnessed at certain times to become efficient ways of using energy. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure you like the video and subscribe for more content like this.